Hey, true believers. Chris Mack coming at you with X-Men 178. I've been looking for this book for a long time, and I'm glad to finally have it because I thought the cover was absolutely beautiful. But I will admit, the story, it's so-so. Why do I say so-so? Let's go ahead and dive in. This was shortly after the events of House of M, when the Scarlet Witch said no more mutants. And so kind of this event was called decimation. So everyone's starting to realize who doesn't have powers and whatnot. So this kind of started spiking up, Cyclops being more protective of the people that still had the X gene. The print date on this was January of 2006. I don't have the first issue, but suffice it to say these Sentinels end up on the doorstep of the Xavier Institute. Lorna ends up, what seemingly looks like she got attacked by these things. So the first part of the book is Alex and Cyclops, of course, getting into it. Now, one thing that I do want to talk about is I sometimes feel like characters need to grow. So, for example, Polaris and Havoc have been a couple since way back in the early days of Claremont. And I even think maybe before Claremont took over. I'm not 100% sure on that. Let me know down in the comments. But, they've always been screwed with. Every time that they think they're going to get together and settle down, something happens to them. Polaris became part of the Marauders, and Havoc was mind-controlled and kind of got reluctantly drafted into the X-Men and then had to play dead in the Australian outback. And then it kind of feels like once Claremont came off the book, the only other person that kind of had a working understanding was Peter David during X Factor. But a lot of these characters that were crafted during the Claremont and Simonson and the Santee days, it feels like you kind of get into the modern books, and a lot of these characters, modern writers don't know what to do with them. Havoc and Polaris, Rogue, Gambit, kind of. And you can kind of see it in this book. So we'll talk about it in a minute. I just wanted to throw that out there. So spoiler alert, if you've not read this book, again, if you haven't, pause this video, go get the book, come back, and you're back. So these Sentinels that show up on the Xavier's doorstep are not the regular hunter-killer ones created by Trask. These are instead humans piloting them, so you can kind of akin this to Pacific Rim, essentially, except minus the whole mind merging, melding, kaiju stuff. Anyway, so again, Cyclops thinks that these people are here to attack them. And before we go any further, let's talk about who made House Arrest. This is called The Transmogrification of Robert Drake. Peter Milligan writing, Salvador Larroca doing the pencils, Danny Minke with Alan Martinez inks, Liquid with Soto and Cho doing the colors, VC's Corey Petit doing the lettering. Here's everyone else working on the book. And of course, the X-Men were created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and were revitalized by Len Wein and Chris Claremont and all the artists that worked on it back in the day. Now, the artwork is decent, though I do have a particular beef with Salvador Larroca. I feel like, even though the work can be beautiful, I feel like this lack of detail, like if you look at the faces, there's just something missing about them. Like the faces just feel semi-generic. I don't know. I've seen it in reviews from his current Alien work. I think he was the one working on Uncanny during the Matthew Rosenberg era. I'm not 100% sure, but the artwork looks familiar. And that's just one thing about Salvador Larroca is the facial work just, it lacks. I mean, look at Lorna. She looks so generic, as where, I can't, it wasn't every time I want to do a review, my brain just goes, like during the X Factor era. I can't remember the guy's name, but it starts with an L. He was the penciler. And each character, Lorna, Havoc, Pietro, Madrox, Strong Guy, they all had certain qualities about their face. But here, under Lorca's watch, look at Val and Lorna. They look interchangeable. The only discerning features they have are their hair. So that's just one of my gripes with his artwork. You know, I'm not saying I could do better. It's been a long ass time since I've drawn anything. So, but just from reading and drawing, and you know, all the from all the different people that I learned from, always talking about, you know, detailed features in the face. Well, this is pretty bad. Anyway, one of the important things you find out from M Days, I think it was established in the last issue from what I gleaned, is that Iceman no longer has his powers. Lorna doesn't have her powers. And again, so real quick, Val's saying, I have to stop this before someone really gets hurt, meaning Cyclops and all them attacking those Sentinel robots. And then Lorna says, Val, the thing with my powers, I don't want anyone else knowing they're gone. And so she's kind of in denial. She's like, it might be psychological, who knows? And she keeps asking myself, why me? Scott and Alex and Rogue are fine. You'd think the daughter of Magneto would be the last mutant this happens to. Now, what I'm talking about is I don't like that Lorna acts so insecure. She's worried that if she admits that she's lost her powers, that she's going to lose her friends, she's going to lose Alex. Honey, you guys have been together for years and years and years and years. You're family. Go back to the Claremont era and the Peter David era. Even when Lorna felt insecure, she was a strong woman that would always stand her ground and get what she wanted. And not in a cruel way. Like if you go back and look at the X Factor reviews, she was a little jealous of Reign, because Reign kind of created this bond with Havoc in the fallout of Extinction Agenda. And instead of Lorna acting like she is here, she just quipped right back at Reign and given her shit. That's the Lorna I know. So I don't know why we come 2006 and I feel like her attitude sort of changed during the Chuck Austin era, which we don't talk about. But she came off as a major bitch, basically forcing Havoc to want to marry her and doing her own thing and making Alex seem weak and incompetent. And I remember that pissing me off. And that was before I knew the X-Men as much as I know now. But then this is like a complete 180. Now she's insecure. And then we go into the modern stuff with House of X, and she acts like a tween. That's what I mean, is sometimes people need to sit back, go back and read the classics and say, okay, this is what Lorna's personality is supposed to be. You know, when you take over a book and you have the responsibilities of these characters that have been around forever, that people love, and, you know, you could tweak them a little bit. Like, for example, when we get down to the Brian Michael Bendis era of Uncanny X-Men, after the fallout of AVX, I like the idea that Cyclops got a little more embittered and kind of became more malicious. It made for some interesting storytelling. Yeah, a lot of people started to hate him, but it was different. It caused strife, controversy. But at the core of it, Cyclops was still him. He still believed in what he believed. He was just a little more pissy about it. But when you just completely turn someone like Lorna, who's a strong woman who deeply loves Alex, into this either major bitch, insecure, puppy dog-like character, or a tween, what the hell are you thinking? That's horrible. Now, again, this may not be Peter Milligan. This has probably just been later years, because at this point I was in college and I dipped out of these books. So kind of coming back, it's just sort of like, what the hell? Now, what was kind of interesting during this time that I do remember is that Iceman and Lorna were in a relationship. Interesting. Made for, you know, kind of shook things up instead of the regular Havoc Lorna thing. Though, going back to what I was talking about at the beginning of this review in terms of characters needing to grow, okay, her and Bobby in a relationship, no problem. Though I would have preferred to see him marry, what was her name? Was it Leela Channing? I can't remember. I think that was her name. But, you know, she built Bobby up all the time during X Factor. And it would have been great to see him settle down with her. And it would have been great to see Polaris and Havoc settle down together, get married, and move on. Just how back in the 90s they finally tied the knot with Jean and Scott. Why is it so freaking hard to do this for other characters that have these solid relationships that you care about? I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. But anyway, so Bobby's, for some reason, separated from the group, trying to find Lorna. He doesn't have his powers, and so he's having to dodge, I think they're called, I got on a tangent, I totally forgot the majority of the plot of this book. This group, there is a group on the grounds that wants to take out the mutants. I think they're called like the Human something or other. It's another mutant extreme group. Let's go to the beginning. It tells you here. Hold on a second. Bloop. Bloop. The Sapien League attacks the Xavier Institute during the assault. The X-Men are shocked to see 5 giant Sentinels drop from the sky and land directly on their property. Okay. Brains back. So, the Sapien League. Now, what I like here is everyone's still wanting to fight these Sentinels, but then Val comes out, stop firing, I'll come up there and drag you out with my bare hands. And this is what I've always liked about Val. From the beginning, as far back as I can remember, is, yeah, she can come off as a major bitch too, but she's like Lorna, where she's stern and can be cruel at times, but she's walking a fine line. She's a human who wants to integrate Xavier's dream. She wants to see mutants and humans work together. Now, she kind of did shit the bed, essentially, when she started her first, what was the one that Mystique, it wasn't the Mutant Liberation Front. I can't remember what it was called, but it had Blob, Pyro, Avalanche, Mystique, and they essentially took advantage of her. So when she, that kind of left a black mark on her record, but she did redeem herself by taking over the X Factor name and making it a government-issued team, and that's where issue 71, that's where Havoc took over. She recruited Lorna, Rain, Guido, Madrox, Pietro, and that's how we got the Peter David era of X Factor. Val, again, walking that fine line of having to manage the mutants who are a little embittered because of what's happened to them through the years, and also trying to ease the tension on the human side. Again, here she is. She's trying something different. So, as I said at the beginning, how these Sentinels are human, essentially, you come to find out that they're pilots. And that's what I meant by the kind of the Pacific Rim thing, where this is Sentinel Squad 1, or whatever their team's called. And Val's saying that they're here indefinitely on the Xavier grounds to protect them, i.e. what's going on with the Sapien League. I knew that would come back. But again, Val walking that thin line, because these guys are human. They really do not want to be here, but they're here because of orders, and so you got to do what you got to do. But check this out. The leader tries to say, Cyclops, I've heard a lot about you. It's a pleasure to meet you. And Scott, again, because the connotation of the Sentinels, if memory serves correctly, this was after Grant Morrison's New X-Men. If you haven't read Grant Morrison's New X-Men, fan-frickin-tastic. So, again, other than the Sentinels, of course, just being mutant-killing hunter robots, during the beginning of New X-Men, Cassandra Nova, who is Professor Xavier's sister, hijacked a bunch of Sentinels and completely wiped out Genosha. Like, full-on genocide. And so the Sentinels up to this point, is very much a sore spot. So Cyclops is not having any of that. And so one of the squad members is like, somehow I don't think the feeling is reciprocated, Lex. So I like that we get this tension. And of course the standoff about Lorna saying, or not Lorna, Val saying that they're here to stay. And then you kind of start to see the infiltration of the Sapien League. And this right here, this chick right here, she reminded me of a female Casey Jones. And what's interesting is, of course, when you're a leader of any type of militia group, you always need to have tactics. That's why a lot of leaders always study old war general strategies. And she says the Institute is like their spiritual home. Take that and we make a statement, especially after what's just happened to so many of them. So I'm not condoning what she's saying, but in terms of tactics, that is a good idea. If you think back to the modern Krakoa era of X-Force, what was it like within the first 1 or 2 issues? They found there was an extreme group, I can't remember what they're called, but they found a way to infiltrate Krakoa and assassinate Professor X. Of course, that doesn't freaking matter because mutants can't die now. But what was so poignant about that was the fact that everyone that thought they were, safe and got complacent found out that they aren't untouchable. And that was the whole point, is to show that you mutants are not untouchable on this island. We can find a way to infiltrate. So again, I'm not condoning these actions, but in terms of studying tactics and finding ways to stir the pot, that's what leaders of whatever faction, good or bad, do. Now, what kind of kills me is the interludes in this book feel very jumpy. Like there's a part with Akaba, and it's 2 pages. There's no real reveal. There's a whole lot of silhouette. And the same with this. Then we jump to the space station, and we get this, which I'm assuming is dupe. I'm not 100% sure on that. I'll probably find out if I could ever find the next issue. But then it's just like, okay, back to the story. See, and that's another thing that I've talked about in past reviews, is a lot of people do not know how to do meanwhiles like the old writers, i.e. Claremont, Hama, Peter David, too many names. I had too many names. But, all the way through 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. But now this felt like a jump cut. Instead of it saying like, meanwhile, like Claremont used to do, and they'd be like a couple more pages, and he'd dedicate to at least build you up, say, okay, well, this is a future plot point. This is just kind of, okay, we see a shadow in Akaba, and we see a booger on a telescope. Not really helping me out or really getting me invested. And that's just me. And here, I know I've talked about how I hate LOL so random humor. I still do. But what I like about Bobby is he's always been kind of like the really bad jester that can try to deflate a situation. Like, for example, the Sapien League here is like, me? A mutant? You kidding? I work in the kitchens here. Most night I spit in their soup, just for the hell of it. Stop talking. So this is him trying to play it off so he can get back to the team. Instead of like, oh, LOL pop culture reference here, pop culture reference there, ponies in MySpace and Facebook.com. It's just Robert Drake's personality, not horrible sitcom humor that we see in a lot of more modern books, or 3 pages of fighting over coffee like in New Mutants. So that's the difference there, is at least Milligan understands what Bobby's personality is supposed to be and kind of plays it off there, and it works. Now I'm trying to find the rest of the book, but it seems like I'm getting buried with ads. So what kind of invested me, like, overall this book kind of felt more like build-up. Like this felt like a filler issue to kind of build up more plots for this decimation event. Because there's something that here towards the end that gets really interesting with Bobby, and then we cut. And it took all this other exposition and dialogue to finally get something interesting. Yeah, they had a couple of fights here or there, but Rogue kind of was the background character. Like all the X-Men, for the most part, instead of seeing them in action and full to form, it was just a bunch of them standing around. Like Rogue didn't do anything, Rockslide didn't do anything, Beast maybe had a line. I hate that. Like for example, another thing to kind of delve into my development with comic books is I used to draw my own when I was a kid. Bad art, obviously. But I remember my friends and my mom telling me that when you do the cover, make sure that it has something to do with the inside of the book. So if you go back to the old days of comics, and even up to hell, let's say the 90s X-Men #1, even though they were all variants, but they all connected, it showed the new, or it showed the gold and blue team together fighting Magneto. So that #1 from the 90s, that was the plot building up as Magneto was back to his old ways. So each cover represented what was going to happen inside the book. And that was just status quo for years. Now you get a cover and you have a hell of a time discerning what the hell is going to go on inside the book. Now don't get me wrong, the artwork's freaking fantastic. Again, that's what drew me to the book initially. But Wolverine tearing out the head of a Sentinel, that's what you want to see. And instead, what do you get? That's it. There's no Wolverine action in this book. How freaking disappointing is that? Rogue, one of the strongest members, you know, again, kind of in a sense flawed because, you know, she used to be part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but then Mystique took her to Xavier. And Claremont had a way of fleshing her out, Dazzler out, Kitty out, and making them very predominant, very interesting, intricate characters of the X-Men. Now she's just there, standing, no Wolverine action. Rockslide's a newer member from the new X-Men, I think. No Rock action. He gets a line of dialogue that talks shit, and that's it. That's irritating. Anyway, this video has gone on for too long. It's not a bad comic. It's serviceable. But take notes from the classics of what makes a good story, the balance of good drama and character development mixed with action, not standing around and exposition dumping. Now, I'm glad I picked this book up. I'm thankful for that because it has some good concepts, and I'm going to continue reading the event and see if it gets any better, especially what happened with M-Day. So that's all I got to say, folks. If you've enjoyed this comic book, please first and foremost support your local comic shop and see if you can get a copy. If you've enjoyed this review, we really would appreciate it if you take a moment to hit like, share, and subscribe. Helps the club channel more than you could possibly know. And if you wouldn't mind hitting that fancy little X bell next to subscribe, that way we continue to upload content, you guys will get notified. Come to the channel, and we love talking with you and hearing your thoughts and your comments down in the comment area below, or our social media pages, which I'll be sure to leave the links down in the description. So with all that said, thank you so much for stopping by. Hope you all continue to have an absolutely amazing day reading, and happy hunting, true believers.